Hello everyone, this is Venom Geek Media here, and today I thought I'd do another discussion video on something that is, an opinion that's going to be, I think, a little bit controversial. I don't know, I think it helps kind of make sense of a lot of things, and I think that it does kind of make sense with what we see on screen, and that is that Klingons have no honor. Or at least, the Klingon honor is not anything we could really say is recognizable as honor. And why do I say this? Well, because in the series there's a lot of inconsistency around honor, and they really throw the word around pretty loosely and pretty generously just to anything. Honor seems to mean any number of things and is pretty liberally applied. And I'm just thinking particularly in examples of, my own videos where we've encountered dishonorable Klingons or military practices, which would seem to conflict with that sense of honor. So, for example, using a cloaking device. Well, how's that honorable? Some of the actions they'll take during the invasion of Cardassia, they're not particularly honorable. What I'm really looking into here is, what is this honor system that the Klingons are constantly banging on about, and can we really call it an honor system? I'm going to cite some real-world examples, and fingers crossed I don't get demonetized for doing that. Of cultures that harp on about honor, but then kind of in the eyes of the wider world don't act very honorably. So let's have a look with some of the examples of Klingon honor. Yeah, actually, we'll go on to yesterday's Enterprise, where the Federation displays an act of honor in defending an outpost. So defending the vulnerable, that seems to be part of their honor system, and that seems important. And taking risks at the expense of others, that's seen as very honourable. So that's interesting. The idea of sort of being honourable in defence, and that's quite a universal concept. Now, this bit is interesting. They considered some races dishonourable, or at least almost inherently dishonourable, like the Breen, the Ferengi, the Jem'Hadar, despite the fact that the Jem'Hadar kind of get it, and they kind of respect the Cardassians, because they claim they follow a code. Although, again, Cardassians following a code, have you seen what they do? I would never characterize Cardassians as particularly honourable. And it's interesting that they just say flat out some races are just dishonourable. That seems a bit harsh and, slightly specious, if you ask me. And here we are, we've got lots of Klingons who act dishonorably. So, and that's just throughout Deep Space Nine. There's a lot of corruption, and Next Generation, and they just kind of let it go. So honor seems to be a useful tool, at least by the higher echelons in Klingon society, as a kind of a moral, elevation. They can say, we are honorable, and then behind the back, they're allowing all sorts of dishonourable things to happen. It's also taken into account, going back to the Next Generation era and looking at sort of what yesterday's Enterprise was hinting at, which is the Romulans, and the Romulans during the early 24th century are trying to trying to establish something of a relationship with the Klingons. Not all Romulans like this idea, which is why they attack him. Anyway, but in the episode Mind's Eye and in the Drumhead, we see two Klingons who are pretty open and vocal when they're caught. They're pretty open and vocal about their support for the Romulans, who apparently aren't listed as a dishonourable race, despite their whole clandestine action and their whole, being pretty nasty. And they say the Romulans respect honor, they respect strength and all this and that and the other. So I'm like, okay, so what is this honor? What is this strength? Because on one level, they're claiming that Starfleet has displayed honor, but they can never understand it. Now, here's my leap to reality and a reality comparison. We don't have any kind of definition of what Klingon honor is. There's no, written down text. I'm presuming in some kind of the religious texts around Kahless, there probably are written things that this is honorable, this is not, kind of prescriptive statements, but there aren't. So I'm gonna make a bit of a jump and compare what are the Klingons based on. Well, early Klingons in TOS are based on the Soviets. That's pretty obvious, and they kind of honor doesn't seem to come in at that point. That really seems to come later, and they're really there to mustache twirl and be all smug, and yes, we're going to that whole Khrushchev thing of we will overtake you, we will bury you. But later, when they're sort of developed, you're looking at more of a basis in, there's obviously some Norse in there, particularly with their whole use of singing. But also, I would argue, a lot taken from medieval Japan. In terms of like some of the architecture, seems very inspired by it. And again, that obsession with honor. So it is worth, I think, looking at Bushido. So here are the 8 virtues of Bushido on Wikipedia. So there's righteousness. Be honest in your dealings with all people. Believe in justice, not from other people, but from yourself. So actually, what that means is you are the arbiter of justice in a sense. To a true warrior, all points of view are deeply considered regarding honesty, justice, and integrity. And warriors make full commitment to their decisions. So it very much sounds like it's saying if you believe something is right, then that's good enough, which is pretty relativist and pretty shaky. I could be getting that wrong. If anyone knows more about Bushido and Japanese history, absolutely let me know. And I'm just kind of looking at this comparatively on a sort of surface level. Then we get heroic courage. Now this is definitely something that the Klingons like. Heroic courage, don't hide, get out there and fight and all of that. But equally they say it is not blind, it is intelligent and strong. Now this is something I think that could be argued, that's the Klingons. It's like they're honourable and they have this courage. They're not idiots, though. They aren't doing what the Jem'Hadar are doing, which is, crashing their ships into enemies. They are being a little bit more smart. Sometimes not that much smarter, but a little bit. So that's worth considering. Benevolence and compassion. Through intense training, hard work, a true warrior becomes quick and strong. They are not as most people. They develop a power that must be used for good. Okay, what is good? They have compassion, and they help their fellow men at every opportunity. Okay, if an opportunity does not arise, they must find a way, they must go out their way to find one. The question is, who kind of qualifies as your fellow men? So again, looking back at the Klingons, well, who would they say are worth going out of their way to help? Is it just other Klingons? Is it people, other species that they also regard as honourable? Can that be extended to the species seen as dishonourable? Respect. Now, this is an interesting one. True warriors have no reason to be cruel. They do not need to prove their strength. Warriors are not only respected for their strength in battle, but in their dealings with others. The true strength of a warrior becomes apparent during difficult times. Now, this is interesting, and because of a real-world example I'll later cite, Klingons definitely have a proclivity to cruelty. They can. They're not the worst, by any means, but it's a pretty shaky thing. Now, have the Klingons ever done anything like I'm going to cite as a real-world example? I don't know. Again, possibly during the 4 Years' War, because that was pretty nasty. When the warriors say they perform an action, it is good as done. Nothing will stop them from completing it. I mean, that's, your word is your bond. Honor. Warriors have only one judge of honor and character, and that is it, and it is themselves. So you're meant to yourselves, and you cannot hide from yourself. Again, that's pretty subjective and pretty open to abuse in terms of, self-perception, also perception of others. So there's a lot of flexibility in that. Duty and loyalty. Warriors are responsible for everything they have done and everything they have said, and all of the consequences that follow. They are immensely loyal to all those in their care, to everyone. So, loyalty, yeah, again, Klingons seem to practice this. Do they really? And, to an extent, we can see them extending this loyalty, at least later on in Deep Space Nine, to the Federation. So, there are some of these things at play that do seem to suggest, but equally, there are some very, if we say that the Klingon code is similar to Bushido, there's quite a few pretty loose tenets that could be pretty loosely interpreted and taken a very subjective view of. So there you go, and so that leaves it open to abuse. So then, here's my point: is you have this code of Bushido, which was always heavily encouraged as part of the tradition. I don't think I need to tell a lot of my American subscribers about what we would consider dishonorable actions of the Japanese army in the Second World War. And bear in mind, and when I say the Second World War, I mean all the stuff that when they started it, because they started it back in 1933, well ahead of everyone else, and for their actions particularly in Nanking. I'm not going to say what happened. You can look it up, and if you don't know what happened, definitely you should know. And fingers crossed that doesn't get me demonetized. Well, one of the more kind of well-known things is the poor treatment of prisoners, and I think this is something that the Klingons share. They do not like prisoners, and they do not like people who surrender. This is shown repeatedly in Next Generation: A Matter of Honor. There's this Klingon officer whose father was captured by Romulans. He was eventually released, but now he waits to die, and his son will not talk to his father because he was captured. That's very essential, because there's this perception that honor is exclusively other cultures. We, in the kind of the West, in Western civilization, do have a concept of honor. It's essentially derived from chivalry. Chivalry is actually something that I think was largely retroactively projected onto the Middle Ages. Bear in mind, it was kind of newly adopted at the time because the Pope wanted knights to not kill each other, tried to convince them that they didn't have to go around killing each other. But it subsequently went from being a kind of a surface level thing to being a more ingrained thing. And you can see honor practiced kind of as it goes on. As wars in Europe go on throughout the centuries, taking prisoners becomes a bigger and bigger thing. It's not a huge thing in medieval society, but by the 18th, 19th century, it's huge. Capturing prisoners is very, very valuable. And First, Second World War, huge amounts of prisoners are taken. And it's a very important practice. And that's another element also, is the idea of the honourable surrender, the honourable prisoner. Essentially, it comes from this idea of it's pointless and inhumane to continue to fight when you have already lost. You've effectively lost, and all your continued fighting will do is simply kill more people to no avail. That's something the Klingons seem very keen on, and it's something the Jem'Hadar are very keen on, but not the Federation. Well, what does it do? Well, it makes things pretty difficult, and I think you could even argue and say that's dishonorable to continue to fight even if you're in a hopeless situation. Certainly by our perspective, it is. And that's where the idea of the honorable surrender comes from. Now, on the flip side, here's the other thing. Do the Klingons perceive defeat as ultimately dishonorable, as Imperial Japan did? Is that if you were defeated, you better go perform seppuku? I'm not so sure. Klingons don't like people who surrender and, they're dishonorable. But I have to think about the nature of the Klingon Empire, particularly as it's suggested by Star Trek Online, where you've got part of it, you've got you've got Klingons, obviously, you've got Orions and Gorn, and they seem to have been folded in. And that's sort of an implication that we're getting from Discovery. I will do a whole video, actually, where I wonder what happened to the Orions. But the Klingon Empire seems a pretty good candidate, or it would make sense if they believed in honor in defeat. But that would be incompatible with the So what do I mean with honor in defeat? So, for example, I'm going to cite another empire, historical empire, the British Empire, really had that at a core, which was basically just because we defeated an enemy doesn't mean they're rubbish, and it doesn't mean they're weak and pathetic or dishonorable. If we've had to fight them and if they put up a good fight, then, let's turn that around. And we did so with the Gurkhas, who continue to fight in the British Army today. We defeated them after several attempts, and we were like, you guys are really good. And, we can appreciate that. Do you want to turn around and fight for us? And that's what happened. And it happened again with the Maori tribes, who really gave us a run for our money. And after eventually defeating them, and it wasn't eventually, they came and joined the British, became an essential part of the British Army. And that came from this notion of honour in defeat, which is just because you defeat an enemy does not mean that they are undeserving of respect or seen as being viewed as honourable. That seems something that you can only have if you believe in the honourable surrender. Because the Klingons don't believe in an honourable surrender, or don't seem to, I would doubt that they believe in honouring the defeated and treating the defeated as honourable, because basically if you're honourable, you would win, magically, somehow. Looking at that and looking at some of the ideas of Klingon honour, are they particularly honourable? They're not the least honourable, but in fairness, they never kind of use honour to temper their military actions. Like I say, I don't know if the Klingons in canon have ever done anything, but I'd be interested to know if there was something like in Fassa in the 4 Years' War, where they did do something like that. So, I mean, those are just my thoughts on the subject, and kind of the issues the Klingons have with being described as honourable and all of that, and does it really translate? Does it really work? I'm not sure. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.